I would be like to hear your opinion about my story. Here's something no one warns you about. When a woman chooses who pays over who loves, she doesn't leave loudly. She upgrades quietly and lets you keep believing you're still her home. I didn't understand that yet when my phone vibrated at 10:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. Unknown number, no greeting, no explanation, just a photo. My wife, Alina, was sitting on another man's lap. Not caught mid-movement, not leaning in by accident, not pulled close against her will. Comfortable, relaxed, balanced there like that position had been rehearsed. The man's arm rested around her waist with ownership, not excitement. The table in front of them was set for two, wine glasses, soft lighting, the kind of place you go when you don't want witnesses. I didn't drop my phone. I didn't shout. I didn't feel that movie-style rush of rage people talk about. I just stared. Not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, but because my mind was still offering me alternatives, angles, context, anything that wouldn't require me to accept that my marriage had just ended silently. My name is Mark Levin. I'm 34 years old. I'm not dramatic. I don't yell. I don't throw things. I believe most problems can be solved if you slow down and listen carefully enough. Alina is 31. Emotional, expressive, sensitive, or at least that's how she described herself. She cried during commercials, laughed loudly in public, and accused me often of not feeling deeply enough. I thought that meant she needed reassurance. I didn't realize it meant she needed attention, constant, expensive attention. She worked at a mid-sized firm downtown. New job, new energy, new confidence. Her boss, Victor Hale, was in his early 40s, divorced, polished. The kind of man who always smelled like money and never apologized for it. At first, she called him a mentor. "He really sees my potential," she said. "He pushes me to want more. He says I shouldn't settle." More arrived quickly. A new phone she claimed she won through work. Designer accessories she found online for a great price. Dinners she didn't pay for because the company was celebrating something. I didn't question it. That's the thing about being kind and balanced. People assume you're also blind. I trusted her. I loved her. I believed that loyalty mattered more than luxury. The photo told me she believed something else. I zoomed in slowly. Her hand rested on his shoulder, familiar, unashamed. Her smile wasn't playful. It was satisfied. That hurt more than anything else. Under the photo was a short message. "I'm sorry. You deserve to know. Lena." I didn't know who Lena was yet. I didn't reply. I didn't call Alina. I didn't confront anyone. I saved the photo, backed it up to 3 places, and made myself a cup of tea. Because panic destroys leverage. And leverage, I suspected, was about to matter more than love ever did. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was spiraling, but because my brain had switched into review mode. When something doesn't make sense, I replay it from the beginning, slowly, carefully, looking for the moment where the story stopped being honest. Alina came home just after midnight. I heard the key turn, her heels by the door, the familiar rhythm of someone who believed everything was still exactly where she left it. She walked into the bedroom, glanced at me, and smiled. That same practiced, emotional smile she used when she wanted warmth without questions. "You're still awake?" she asked softly. "Couldn't sleep," I said, calm, neutral. "True enough." She sat on the edge of the bed and started talking, not about work, not about her boss, about how tired she was, how stressful everything had become, how she felt like she was carrying so much lately. That was her favorite phrase, carrying. as if life was something happening to her, never something she was actively shaping. I nodded, listened, let her talk herself into comfort. She leaned in and kissed my cheek. "You're always so steady," she whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you." I smiled. Inside, something settled into place. After she fell asleep, I got up quietly and went to the kitchen. I opened my laptop and searched the number that had sent me the photo. It didn't take long. Lena Morozova, mid-20s, worked in the same department as Alina. I found her profile on social media easily, not private, not careful, the kind of person who still believed truth mattered more than consequences. Her posts told a story Alina never had. Long hours, sudden changes in management tone, Victor's attention becoming selective, promotions hinted at, never delivered, and beneath it all, frustration. That's when I understood something important. Victor didn't just choose Alina, he selected her. Men like him don't chase emotionally, they evaluate. He'd seen her hunger, her insecurity, her need to feel chosen. He gave her exactly what she wanted, validation with a price tag attached. And Alina accepted eagerly. The gifts weren't spontaneous, they were strategic. A phone, so she could always be reachable. Accessories, so she'd feel elevated. Dinners, so she'd associate success with his presence. Payment disguised as appreciation. Love wasn't part of the transaction. I went back to the bedroom and watched her sleep. She looked peaceful, innocent even. That was the most disturbing part. She wasn't consumed by guilt or fear. She was satisfied, comfortable, confident she'd made the right trade. In the morning, she was cheerful, too cheerful. She hummed while making coffee, kissed my cheek again, talked about weekend plans like the future was still shared territory. "You seem quiet," she said lightly. "I'm thinking," I replied. "About what?" "Work stuff," I said, another small truth misdirected. She smiled, satisfied, and left for the day wearing one of the accessories Victor had bought her. She didn't even hide it anymore. I didn't feel angry. I felt clear. Alina didn't cheat because she was lonely. She cheated because she calculated that security could be replaced with status. And Victor didn't seduce her, he invested. By the time my phone buzzed again that afternoon, I already knew what the next move would be. Because once you see the structure, emotion becomes optional. And I was done being the only one paying for her choices. By the third day, the shock had completely worn off. That surprised me. I always thought betrayal would feel explosive, rage, heartbreak, chaos all at once. Instead, what settled in was something quieter and far more dangerous: understanding. Once you understand why something happened, you stop arguing with reality. I started noticing details I had ignored for months. Alina's wardrobe hadn't just improved, it had shifted. Everything was sharper now, more deliberate. Clothes chosen to be noticed, not just worn. Accessories that didn't fit our budget but fit perfectly into a different life. She moved differently too. Straighter posture, chin slightly raised, confidence borrowed from someone else's approval. At breakfast, she scrolled through her phone constantly, smiling at messages she didn't share. When I asked simple questions, she answered quickly and redirected the conversation, like a skilled salesperson closing a deal before objections appeared. "How's work?" I asked one morning. "Busy," she said, "but exciting." That word again, exciting. She used it the way gamblers talk about risk, romanticizing danger so it feels like progress. After she left, I messaged Lena. I kept it simple. "Thank you for telling me. I'm not angry, I just want to understand." She replied 10 minutes later. "I didn't want to be the kind of person who stayed silent. I'm sorry it had to be this way." We talked carefully at first, two people navigating a shared truth from opposite sides. She told me what she'd seen: the private meetings, the favors disguised as mentoring, the way Victor spoke about Alina when he thought no one else was listening. "She knows what she's doing," Lena wrote at one point. "She's not confused." That line stayed with me. Alina wasn't lost. She was choosing. Victor's role became clearer with every detail. He never promised love. He promised access, influence, protection. He rewarded obedience and punished hesitation. He enjoyed watching people orbit him, dependent on his approval. And Alina thrived in that gravity. "She likes feeling selected," Lena said, "like she won something." That explained everything. At home, Alina played her part perfectly, emotional when it suited her, vulnerable when she needed reassurance, passionate when she sensed distance. She cried once over nothing, a commercial, she said, and I held her while she trembled, knowing exactly where that energy came from. She wasn't torn between two men, she was managing two roles. With Victor, she was ambition dressed as affection. With me, she was security dressed as love. I realized then that if I confronted her emotionally, she would win. She would cry, deflect, reframe, and turn confusion into sympathy. Emotion was her native language, so I chose clarity instead. I gathered evidence quietly. Dates, times, photos Lena shared, screenshots, patterns. I didn't rush. Rushing is for people who want closure more than outcomes. One evening, Alina held up her new phone and laughed. "Can you believe my luck lately?" she said. I smiled back. Luck is just timing with confidence. She liked that answer. She didn't know I was already preparing to take timing away from her. Because when someone chooses money over love, they assume love will stay quiet. They don't expect it to document everything. The gifts became impossible to ignore once I stopped pretending they were accidental. Alina didn't announce them anymore. She let them appear organically, like they had always belonged to her. A bracelet on the dresser, a jacket draped over a chair, a new pair of shoes placed carefully by the door, still smelling like a store I knew we didn't shop at. When I asked, she had explanations ready. End of quarter bonus, client appreciation. He's very old school about rewarding initiative. She said he without hesitation now. Victor had become a constant presence in her language, normalized, justified, absorbed into daily life. She spoke about him the way people talk about weather, unavoidable, powerful, not to be questioned. I stayed kind. That part was easy. Kindness was still honest. I wasn't pretending to be someone else. I just wasn't giving her the reaction she expected. No suspicion, no jealousy, no insecurity to soothe. It made her bolder. One evening she came home with a box and set it on the kitchen counter like a trophy. "Open it," she said. Inside was a phone, newer, more expensive than the one I owned. "I thought you said you won one already," I said lightly. She waved it off. "That was temporary. This one's better for work," Victor insisted. Insisted, another word that removed responsibility from her hands while tightening his grip. She watched my face carefully, waiting for concern, for protest. I smiled. "Looks useful." Her shoulders relaxed. Later that night, while she slept, I checked our accounts. Nothing dramatic, no missing money, no obvious transfers. Victor was careful. He paid directly. He understood leverage. Payment creates obligation. The next day, Lena sent me another message. They're not even trying to hide it anymore. She followed with photos. Not explicit, never dramatic, just proximity, familiarity, ownership. Victor's hand always where it didn't belong. Alina never pulling away. What struck me wasn't the intimacy, it was the hierarchy. Victor sat, Alina leaned. Victor spoke, Alina listened. Victor paid, Alina complied. This wasn't an affair built on desire, it was built on economics. At dinner that night, Alina was unusually emotional. talked about how undervalued she'd felt before this job, how invisible she'd been, how hard it was to be a woman with ambition, married to a man who was already content. That stung, not because it was cruel, but because it was rehearsed. She wasn't explaining herself to me, she was justifying herself to herself. "I just want more," she said, eyes glistening. "I know," I said gently. "Everyone does." She smiled, relieved by my understanding. What she didn't realize was that I had already accepted something far more important. She wasn't confused, she wasn't manipulated, she wasn't trapped. She had entered a system where affection was currency and loyalty was optional. And systems like that always collapse the moment the money trail becomes public. I didn't plan revenge, I planned exposure. Because when people choose who pays over who loves, they assume payment guarantees silence. They forget that silence ends the moment someone else decides truth is cheaper than comfort. By the time I reached part 5 of this story in my head, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger is loud, messy. It wants release. What I felt instead was precision. Alina had settled into a rhythm she believed was untouchable. She moved through our home like a guest who had already chosen where she'd be living next. Confident, light, almost generous with affection. Just enough to keep the structure intact. That's what this was to her now. A structure. I watched how carefully she managed it. She'd complain about Victor just enough to sound honest. He's demanding. He expects a lot. But that's how successful people are. Then she'd defend him without being asked. He just wants the best for the team. He rewards loyalty. Loyalty. Another word that had quietly changed meaning. I continued talking to Lena. Not constantly, not emotionally, just factually. She sent me timestamps, meeting schedules, photos taken discreetly from across rooms. Nothing illegal, nothing invasive, just enough to establish a pattern no one could plausibly deny. One message from her stayed with me. They think no one's watching because no one ever confronts them. That was Victor's mistake. Men like him assume power creates invisibility. They forget that people below them see everything. They just choose when to speak. The real proof came accidentally. One evening, Alina asked me to forward a file from her old laptop. She'd forgotten the password and was already running late. I didn't hesitate. She trusted me completely. On the desktop was a folder she hadn't hidden well enough. Poor naming choice. Confidence breeds laziness. Inside were photos. Not the ones Lena sent me. These were Alina's. Selfies in mirrors that weren't ours. Dinners documented from flattering angles. Victor's watch visible in reflections. Hotel rooms framed carefully to look like luxury, not secrecy. She wasn't hiding the affair from herself. She was archiving it. I didn't copy the folder. I didn't need to. Lena had already given me more than enough. What mattered was understanding her mindset. This wasn't an accident. It was a portfolio. That night, Alina came home emotional again. Too emotional. She cried about pressure, about feeling torn, about loving me but needing to feel alive. I held her, let her cry, let her perform the version of herself she needed to believe. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered. "I know," I said quietly. She didn't say she wanted to stop. That was the difference. After she fell asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and organized everything. Not chaotically, methodically. Dates, sources, context. I imagined explaining it to people who didn't want to believe me. So I made it impossible not to. Because the truth doesn't need drama. It needs order. And when order arrives, even the most emotional lies collapse under their own weight. I wasn't preparing to hurt her. I was preparing to end the transaction. I didn't rush to act after that. That was the hardest part, doing nothing while holding everything. People think restraint is passive. It isn't. It's a decision you have to recommit to every single day. Alina sensed a shift, even though I hadn't changed my behavior. She started asking questions that weren't really questions. "You're quiet lately," she said one morning, watching me over her coffee. "Just thinking," I replied. "About us?" "About life," I said, smiling. That answer unsettled her. Emotional people rely on reactions. When you stop reacting, they lose their bearings. Victor, meanwhile, was getting sloppy. Lena told me his mood had changed. He was more demanding at work, short-tempered, protective of Alina in ways that weren't subtle anymore. He'd started talking openly about loyalty and who's really on his side. Power always tightens before it breaks. The message from Lena came on a Friday afternoon. "I took this today. I'm done protecting them." Attached with 3 photos. Not explicit, not dramatic, just undeniable. Alina sitting on Victor's lap in his office, his hand on her thigh. Her face turned toward him, laughing. The office logo was visible in the background. That detail mattered. I thanked her and asked one question. "Are you okay with people knowing where this came from?" She replied almost immediately, "Yes, I don't want to work there anymore anyway." That told me everything I needed to know about her character. She wasn't seeking revenge, she was choosing honesty. I didn't send the photos right away. I waited until Sunday evening. Family group chat, parents, siblings, aunts, people who had welcomed Alina into their lives and believed her emotional performances completely. I wrote one sentence. "I didn't want to explain this in words. I'm sorry you're seeing it this way." Then I attached the photos. I turned my phone face down and went for a walk. By the time I came back, everything had exploded quietly. Missed calls, messages, shock, disbelief, anger directed mostly at Alina. She called me last. Her voice wasn't emotional this time, it was panicked. "You sent them to everyone," she said. "Yes," I replied. "Why would you do that?" she demanded. "Because you built this in secret," I said calmly. "It didn't deserve privacy." She screamed, cried, accused me of cruelty, of humiliation, of ruining her life. Victor called next. That was unexpected. He didn't apologize, he threatened. I listened politely and then forwarded the call log to Lena, who sent it straight to HR. By Monday morning, the office was in damage control mode. By Tuesday afternoon, Alina and Victor were both gone. Not suspended, not transferred, gone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt finished. Because the moment the transaction became public, it collapsed instantly. Money disappears when attention turns into scrutiny. And love, real love, doesn't survive when it's been replaced with sponsorship. I went to bed that night, lighter than I had in months. The story wasn't over yet, but the lie was. The silence after exposure is louder than the moment itself. On Monday morning, Alina didn't go to work. She sat on the couch, staring at her phone like it might explain how everything unraveled so quickly. Her emotions came in waves. Anger, disbelief, tears, then rage again, cycling too fast to be genuine. I made breakfast like I always did. That seemed to unsettle her more than yelling would have. "You don't even care," she said finally, voice shaking. "I care," I replied gently. "I just don't panic anymore." By noon, the family group chat had fractured into private conversations. My parents called first, not to ask what happened, but to ask how I was holding up. Her mother called later, furious, not at me, but at the situation. Alina's version of events fell apart the moment people saw the photos. There was nothing to reinterpret, no angle to soften. By evening, the company email went out. Effective immediately. That's how careers end when they're built on favors instead of merit. Victor didn't call again. Men like him disappear when they're no longer protected by position. Power is loud until it's not. Alina spiraled after that. She cried openly now, not the controlled tears she used to produce, but messy ones. She talked about humiliation, about betrayal, about how I could have handled it privately. I listened. Then I said something that stopped her cold. "You handled it privately for months," I said. "I just ended the privacy." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. That night, she packed a bag. Not because I asked her to leave, because staying meant facing consequences without distraction. She needed space to rearrange the story in her head. I didn't stop her. When the door closed, the apartment felt different. Not empty, quiet. 2 days later, Lena asked if we could talk in person. We met at a small cafe downtown. Neutral ground, public but calm. She looked nervous, like someone bracing for impact that never came. "I didn't do this to get close to you," she said quickly. "I know. That's why I agreed to meet." We talked for hours, about work, about pressure, about how hard it is to watch unethical behavior become normalized. She wasn't bitter, just tired of being silent. She told me she'd already accepted another position elsewhere. Clean break, no drama. I appreciated that. When we stood to leave, she hesitated. "I'm glad you're okay," she said. "So am I replied, smiling. And for the first time since all of this began, that smile didn't feel like armor. It felt natural. Alina messaged me that night. A long text, emotional, circular, apologies mixed with accusations, love mixed with regret. She wanted to meet, to talk, to explain. I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because everything she wanted to say belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. Some endings don't need closure. They need distance. Life doesn't collapse all at once when something ends. It redistributes. The first week after Alina left felt unreal. Not painful, just strangely quiet. I kept expecting the emotional aftershocks people warn you about. Sleepless nights, regret, loneliness. They never came. Instead, my days became simpler. I woke up without tension in my chest. I went to work without checking my phone every hour. I ate meals without someone narrating their dissatisfaction with life. It felt less like loss and more like stepping out of a crowded room I hadn't realized was suffocating me. Alina stayed gone. She texted sporadically at first, long emotional messages sent late at night, apologies tangled with self-pity. She spoke about how Victor had manipulated her, how she'd lost herself, how she'd never meant for things to go this far. I read them once, then archived the thread. Not deleted, archived. Some things don't need to be erased to stop mattering. Her version of events shifted daily. One day she was a victim, the next, a misunderstood woman punished too harshly. At no point did she mention choice, or money, or the fact that she'd never once tried to stop. That told me everything. Victor, on the other hand, vanished completely. No statements, no apologies, just silence. His professional reputation dissolved quietly, the way it had been built, behind closed doors. I heard later he'd moved cities. Fresh start. Same habits, I assumed. The world has a way of recycling people like him. I met Lena again a week later. This time, it wasn't heavy. We went for a walk, talked about normal things, food, travel, work. No trauma bonding, no shared bitterness, just two people who'd stood on opposite sides of the same truth and chosen not to lie about it. She laughed easily. Not loudly, honestly. That mattered to me. We didn't rush anything. There was no dramatic shift from betrayal to romance, just coffee that turned into long conversations that turned into comfort that didn't demand anything. One evening, she said something that stayed with me. "I didn't send you the photo to hurt her," she said. "I sent it because lying was starting to feel heavier than consequences." I nodded. That's usually how you know you're doing the right thing. Alina found out about us eventually, not because I told her, because she asked. Her message was short this time. "So that's it? You moved on already?" I thought about replying, about explaining that moving on isn't measured in time, it's measured in clarity. I didn't send anything. I didn't owe her reassurance anymore. Weeks passed. The legal parts resolved cleanly. No drama, no fighting. She took what she could carry. I kept what I needed. Our lives separated the way they should have long before emotion entered the equation. One night, sitting with Lena on my couch, she asked quietly, "Do you ever miss her?" I smiled, not sadly, but honestly. "I miss who I thought she was," I said, "but I don't miss the cost of believing it." She nodded, understanding without asking more. That was new for me, being understood without being managed. Alina chose the one who paid. I chose the one who told the truth. And slowly, without fireworks or declarations, life found its balance again. Not louder, not richer, just real. Time did what it always does when you stop interfering with it. It sorted things out. The divorce finalized without drama, no courtroom theatrics, no last-minute confessions, no attempts at reconciliation. Alina didn't fight much. She couldn't. Once the illusion collapsed, there was nothing left to defend, only consequences to accept. She tried, once, to have a final conversation, not to apologize properly, not to take responsibility, to explain. She talked about pressure, about ambition, about how Victor had opened doors she didn't even know existed, about how she felt seen for the first time in years. She cried when she said it, like tears might convert choices into accidents. I listened quietly. Then I said something simple. "You didn't choose him because he loved you. You chose him because he paid for the version of yourself you wanted to become." She went silent. That was the moment she understood there was no narrative left to fix. She lost her job, so did Victor. The company moved on quickly, publicly reaffirming its values. Privately, everyone understood what had happened. Office rumors don't fade, they migrate. Victor disappeared from her life shortly after that. Men like him don't stay when the benefits stop. He didn't offer comfort, didn't help her rebuild. He simply vanished, leaving behind the vacuum he'd created. Alina tried to fill it with regret. It didn't work. My life, meanwhile, became unexpectedly peaceful. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. For the first time in a long while, my actions matched my values without compromise. I slept well. I laughed more easily. I stopped questioning my instincts. Lena and I didn't rush into labels. We didn't need to. She was steady in a way that didn't require performance, honest in a way that didn't need decoration. Being with her felt like standing on solid ground after months of careful balancing. One evening, she said, half smiling, "You know, this all started with one photo." I nodded. Photos don't ruin lives. Choices do. Alina chose the one who paid. I chose clarity. And clarity, it turns out, is cheaper than pretending and far more valuable in the long run. If there's one thing I learned from all this, it's this. Love doesn't ask you to compete with money. Loyalty doesn't arrive with gifts, and kindness isn't weakness. It's just dangerous to underestimate. I didn't destroy her life. I didn't expose her out of cruelty. I simply refused to continue funding a lie. And once I stepped away, everything fell into place exactly as it was meant to. Did I behave correctly in this situation? Have you ever been in a similar situation?